So, you know, the the kind of basics of this talk is if you want to build an Android device, Android application yourself, or if you want to start a company. This is the kind of distillation of our experience running a company for the last several years. So, this is obvious, right? But what I remember back in 2000, like put your minds back in 2010, 3 years ago, when the iPad was just about to come out. And I know that I was definitely one of those people that was pretty skeptical. Even though I had my iPhone, this was already changing my world. I had my MacBook, but I definitely didn't predict that the tablets would become successful. And certainly wouldn't have predicted that 3 years later, almost 50% of Americans would have a tablet. And what we're observing now is that I don't think people still quite understand the impact of this. What we're seeing, kind of working with companies in recruitment, is that the job market has essentially sucked up all people who are working who know how to work with Android or iPad, Android tablets or iPads. Because if you think about it, going from 5% of Americans to nearly 50% of Americans has deeply impacted the way that companies think about mobile development. So here's just some more stats of like what our current world is, I guess. And so when we're thinking about startups now, you have to think about mobile first. So Zynga, as well as we do training at Yahoo. That's kind of how we have been testing an iOS and Android curriculum that we've been building. So both of them, Yahoo and AOL fundamentally make their money based off of their web properties. Right? They essentially have all of this content that they sell advertising against. Now, with 2 years ago, 10% of the internet was accessed via mobile phones. Only 1 year later, 20% of the internet was accessed via mobile phones. They believe that in a few years, there's going to be a crossover where actually most of internet access comes from non-fixed devices, non-fixed location devices. And so Yahoo, if you want to stay relevant at all, if you want to even have a chance, and the same with AOL, is that they are massively shifting their organizations, their product teams, their design teams, their engineering teams to be mobile oriented. So as engineers, we realize that there's always a new technology to learn, right? There's always something. There's Go, Erlang, big data, Hadoop, whatever. But Android and iOS is not just another one of those technologies. It's actually like it's an underpinning framework. It's like convincing someone in the 90s that it's pretty important to learn the web. That's how important it is to learn Android and iOS native development. So Nathan my co-founder here, we've been living city life for the last 6 years or so, kind of doing the SF thing, which is kind of starting companies. And we were between startups, and we realized that we wanted to start a company that was around playing with new technologies, learning at an expert level new technologies, especially with other people. And so we started a company called CodePath. So CodePath offers actually free engineering training, which we currently run out of the Zynga offices right now. But we run these 6-week intensive evening boot camps for iOS and Android. Like I said, if any of you guys are engineers, they're free for engineers. And ultimately, the way we fund this school and schools like it, or classes like it, is through a recruitment process. So, but this is the essence of what we wanted to create. We wanted to kind of glue together the things that we loved the most, which was we love to learn from other people. Even though we're engineers, we're actually more social engineers. So I could have sat at home and learned these technologies, but gosh, I really enjoy building products with really great teams, and so we wanted to create this environment. So, who in particular is this talk for? How many people here have thought about building an Android or iOS application or have already built one? Anyone wanted to found a company? So maybe founding a company is too ambitious, maybe too audacious of a statement. Because the truth of the matter is, I think what everyone realizes is that there's this incredible low cost to starting a company now. So Kleiner Perkins, who never traditionally did seed, like for the last 3 years, there's been probably 100 times the amount of seed investments as there were the year prior. So Google Ventures, who was our first investment, our first angel, they went from funding about a dozen seeds, most people fund like Series A and above, to funding hundreds of seeds a year. Basically, the way they think about it was like, they said that the startup market is like an index, and the way you do an index is you invest by volume. And so Kleiner Perkins and Andreessen Horowitz, they're all trying to jump on this boat of saying, like, you have an idea? Go, build it. You know, here's 50K, here's 100K, here's 400K as a seed round, right? So we did that. We did that 4 years ago, and we started a company called Miso. So like I said, it was a Google Ventures angel company. We ultimately raised over the 4 years about $6.5 million. It ran, like I said, for 4 years, and we painfully acquired 500,000 users during that time. We had 2 founders, including myself, product manager, designer, or 2 sometimes, and around 5 engineers. So the point of that story was not that we were outstandingly successful. You guys probably never heard of our company, Miso, social TV company. But because we reached this medium level of success, we were able to keep at it for 4 years. And during that time, you know, and I call it like a beautiful agony, because it was just the most challenging time of my life. But at the same time, it was so rewarding. So before then, prior to that, for about 4 years, I was just an engineer, and I actually had no desire to start a company. I had no particular beef with the concept of working for the man. I didn't have that itch, that desire. And you know, certainly I ran into a lot of people who said, "Hey, I want to start a company one day, but maybe I need to be better prepared before I do that." So if I only have one advice to give you, would be like, just do it now, because there's nothing more rewarding, and frankly, you'll never be prepared. So again, what we want to talk about today was what we found in the development timeline of Android development. So we primarily did Android and iOS development at Miso. Talk about the pitfalls that we faced to see if you guys maybe have had some of the same experiences. And then talk about how we did product analytics at our company. So the first thing with Android that you're asked, my CEO would always ask me, so like, when are we gonna have it done? Maybe you guys get asked that question. How many of you guys here are engineers, by the way? Okay. So I mean, it's a classic question, right? Like, so great. When can you get it done? It's a really tough answer. So put yourself in the mind of like you're a brand new startup venture. You just raised your first seed and you're ready to go, and you're at day 0. And then, as you guys know, it's actually really fast to build native Android. So in only 2 or 3 weeks, you're able to come up with with an execution of your idea. So you're thinking, well on my way. I don't even know what I'm going to do with the rest of this money, this seed money. So you wait for the next 2 weeks, and you see really nothing. Well, surely in the following 2 weeks, still nothing. Finally, literally 1 or 3 months later, is when you'll finally see, you know, your first beta release. And the reason for this, how many of you guys have actually done Android development? Okay, so maybe you guys can understand that there's an 80-20 rule with all engineering, but with Android in particular, it's pretty bad. And the reason why is because, at least in my experience, is that when you want to do things that are really well supported by a system, like I want to create a custom list view and scroll it, and like make a network connection and have it backed by models, it's actually ridiculously easy, right? I could hammer out a Yelp clone, a Twitter clone, in probably just a couple days. A basic functionality. But as soon as you go off the rails of what is supported natively out of the box with the framework, as soon as you get out of their like Lego land, then things take a long time. Like I'll give you an example. For one of the homeworks that we did recently, I had to make a to-do app in iOS. In one of the to-do lines, I said, well, make it so that it will auto-expand that row as you're typing, kind of like when you're typing an SMS message, and the height of that text field would kind of expand. Well, the rest of the project only took them a couple hours, but then that little piece took them probably like 2 days to do. Is that kind of in your experience with Android as well? That like once you're off the rails, it's like incredibly time consuming. Because the web is similar, right? I mean, the web is not dissimilar. It also has the 80-20 rule, but what's happened with the web is that it has had years of development in jQuery and other JavaScript-based frameworks that have kind of augmented that. So, net-net, when you look at what it takes to go from your zero startup idea, this is the timeline that we've seen often, which is that rapid prototyping can make any brand new idea kind of working in about 2 or 3 weeks. Because Android is not about deep technology. It's not, generally speaking, it's just about kind of actualizing an idea. It's not like, crazy machine learning or any kind of like really hard tech. But then to actually close down that those rough corners of your application and make it even halfway reasonable for an outside user takes about 1 to 3 months. And at that point, that's probably the point where some founders will make the decision to like release the app publicly, because who cares, right? Because you release it on the Google Play Store, no one's going to discover it anyway until you market it, and so you may as well. What are you going to lose? But some people will want to keep it in a slightly closed environment, which is wise as well, because it's kind of the Facebook strategy, right? They released first at Harvard, made it really, really strong and functional there before moving into Stanford and other universities, and then all universities, right? That process of optimization with a beta group can take another 3 months before you really take the rough edges off of that product. And so all told, no matter how simple the idea is and how quickly the initial build was, you're probably looking at about 6 months to a year to build your first product. And so the number one lesson that we learned there is expect iteration. You're never going to get it perfect the first time around. So the only thing you need to expect is like, well, how many cycles do I want to build in? So breaking down each 3-week sprint, this is how we did it. So remember that we had a product person, a designer, and an engineer generally working together. So, you have basically a lot of people wearing different hats, all coming really passionately to this vision. So the general cadence that you try to develop was, of course, I want to start with my user story. Let's say that I'm making Uber. I need a fast way. I want instant transportation back home. Say. To how do I accomplish the tasks, the user tasks? Then how do I actually code it and then test it? So our target was always about 3 weeks. It took us a while to get to that stage. Definitely, and it's because of the chaos of having so many people involved, right? So many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. And so it actually probably took us, at least a dozen iterations before we were able to actually crank things out in 3 weeks. So I want to talk in some of the common pitfalls of what was taking, how were we messing up. So the first problem was just refining our ability to do a user story. So when we do our boot camps in SF, so we're teaching these people over a period of 6 weeks to do Android or iOS development. Then we have the intermediate series, and it's all project-based. So instead of me telling you about activities and intents and so on, we say no. Let's actually make this about product engineering, because that's the way that we believe that engineers, noble engineers, have to be in the future. They have to be product engineers. Like, you have to be as involved in design and product as you are in engineering, if you want to be in the startup world. And every big company now considers themselves the largest startup. I don't know how many big companies have said that, right? So here's the first flaw, which is you're talking to that person, and hey, what's your idea? Oh, well, I have this great idea. I'm going to use Yelp, and I'm going to combine it with some machine learning, which I'm going to glue together with some maybe social shares of Facebook. And I'm going to increase virality by this amount. And they're already starting off in the wrong foot. Starting with how you're going to build your idea is starting from the wrong place. So our mission was always to start from like some actual user story. You have to be able to say, I'm in my living room. Imagine a person. They're in their living room. They just got home from work. They are they just need to eat, but they want to eat healthy. And there's no way to kind of like eat healthy, but they have some disposable income. So like starting from like a user story of what that situation is and letting that drive the beginnings of your product. So the other test, which I'm actually still trying to work at, is we call it the crowded bar test, because I tend to talk too much. I like, and the key in product development is how do you distill it? How do you distill it to its finest core? And so this is our test for that, which is if I can tell you my startup idea in a crowded bar, then I pass the test. If someone who can barely hear me, who's a little bit buzzed, and they're having trouble understanding my idea, then my idea is too complex. It's not truly reaching them as a real person. And this one is one of my favorites because this one hurts. This one hurts really badly. This is the idea that you have this idea, and oh, it's going to do this, and then it's going to do this, and I'm going to have this user story here. But like anything, like movie making, like writing, like fashion, the key is always the editing. You gotta cut it down, no matter how much you love every part of that idea. And so we had we had a meeting with the CEO of Foursquare in early days, and we came to him and said, "We want your advice. You know, here are 3 ideas." And he's like, "Okay, we'll pick one." And we went, no, we just can't. No, there's like a tripod, it's like a power pyramid. They support each other. But he's like, "Nope, choose one. And so he made us, like, he really forced us. It's like Sophie's Choice. It's like, you know, you really just got to choose your one story, because you have to be confident that's a powerful enough story. So I'll tell you what, if your one story can't stand alone, adding a second story, it's not like 2 wrongs make a right. And all of a sudden you're getting a beautiful product just from that addition. So once we always try to get better at that, right? And it can be tough because it can be like an echo chamber. But here was our second biggest problem at Miso, which was just the conflict. You know, you had people who, unless they were like, they're just passionate about it, like whether they were the product person or the designer or the engineer, they were all equally passionate about what to do. And so we fought like a weird dysfunctional family, you know. And it took us a while to try to understand how to resolve these things. And we understood that it was all ultimately about asking the right question. So the right question kind of depends. I'll tell you some wrong questions I bet you guys have heard. So a manager comes in, maybe it's a tech manager. I hate those tech managers. And they say, well, can't we just something or other? You know, or if you're a designer, right? Well, can't we just move the button from the left to the right? Can't we just, what if we just have an extra table? Can't we just figure it out that way? I mean, or like, well, okay, but how long would it take to do this part? You know why those are the wrong questions? Because they only have one answer. Can't we just move the button to the left or right? Well, yeah, we can move it from the left to the right. I mean, I'm almost confused about how to process that. Or like as an engineer, I get asked all the time, well, how long would it take? Now you're putting me in speculative mode, but like I don't even, you know, I'm not even on the same page if this is the right idea. But you know, this is a startup asking what the wrong question is when we're in conflict mode. So the key to chasing down like what the right question is, first ask yourself, what stage are you at? So if you're at that first stage, that user story stage, a very fair question is like, is this a real user story? So the late 90s was famous for having bad user stories, right? Like, you know, 80% of Americans have pets. They love their pets. They travel a lot. There must be a market for pet hotels, you know, like, and they kind of come up with what, I don't know if you guys read Paul Graham at all, but like Paul Graham made a great article about coming up with startup ideas. He called these the sitcom ideas. You know, things that just make, on the surface of it, it seems like they make perfect sense, but they're just not real. Or, you know, was this the most important user story? You know, maybe I agree with this, but maybe there's some better use case. If you're at the wireframing stage, so let's say that you're agreed. So maybe you guys talk about the user story, like, no, we agree that I need a convenient way to travel home in a safe and luxurious manner. You know, now we're aligned there, but then how do I, is it maybe just not clear? Maybe it's just not simple. Maybe that's the core of our disagreement. Maybe I think that a person is coming to my app with a certain assumption, and you disagree with that ultimately. So, I mean, our goal is to chase down like why I see a wireframe, and it's not fair for me to say no, I don't like it. Something is weird about it. You have to break it down even finer, right? Like, okay, I think that you know what I don't like about this. They're not strongly tied to the user story. Like, this is an additional feature. It's not really related to the core. Therefore, it's distracting and pulling away from this other part of the UX that is part of the user story. And so that's my reason for not liking this piece. If you get down to visuals, sometimes I definitely had designers come to me with a mock, and you don't want to hurt their feelings because they put so much of themselves into that design, but you don't like it. You don't like the visuals of it. And so you really have to kind of like back away from it and be like, well, what's the demographic of my application? That's a good place to start. Is this a female audience or male audience? Or is it supposed to be unisex? It's supposed to appeal to both. And you can say, well, what kind of emotions? What kind of emotion am I like? Am I like a modern bank? Therefore, I don't want it to be too pastel. Like, all startups now is Helvetica new in pastel colors. But that doesn't seem to strike the right tone for the app that I'm building. So the really tricky thing with visuals is that, or wireframing or user story, is oftentimes what happened with us is that disagreements at wireframing was actually disagreements at the user story, but it just manifested itself in the wireframing or even the visual stage. And so we would have to be like, back up later and be like, oh, okay, we're actually disagreeing about user story. And sometimes that means you just have to start over and go back to that first stage, user stories, and see if we can resolve the conflicts there. But the number one secret, this is the most important part. It's the most important part of working with this mixture of people. Was just calm down. Because when you're in a startup, sometimes it can be like so heated. It can be like it's like you're pouring all of your passion into this. But you have to remember that these iterations are 3 weeks long, and there's about 1 million of them ahead of you. And you're going to be working with these people for another 1 million iterations. So as long as you chase down the fact that like what the core of your disagreement is, which is that like, hey, I don't think this is very clear. No, I disagree with you. I actually think it's totally clear, and I think that adding more will just hurt us. Okay? We need to disagree and commit and just move on. And maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out later which one of us is right. But the idea is at a certain point you just need to kind of like accept what it is and move on. This was the second most painful pitfall that we found. So we would often, as engineers, get handed these wireframes from our designers, and on the face of it, looks great, looks beautiful. I should love it. I believe it fits the user story, and I'm like, great. I'll take it, and I go back to my desk and I start coding it out. Has anyone ever coded an incomplete wireframes before? God, it's the most painful thing in the world because you're just trying to sort out in your head all the edge cases so that you can code the edge cases, but you don't even know what the right behavior is. So the bucket's already been passed to the engineer to try to resolve all of these problems. So they can inflate that's what's caused our iterations to somehow expand from 3 weeks to 9 weeks, because at the end of the day, it was all of these hidden things that came out of the wire. Let me give you an example. Facebook linking is very common now. Understandable why. But Facebook, the account can be unlinked. That's just a feature of the technology. So the access token can become expired. And so the application, you click on Facebook, but the Facebook app is broken, so I'm going to need a whole new set of screens to deal with that situation, to allow them, to prompt them to relink the account. Or it can be much worse. So you need to start asking certain questions. This is the easiest question I feel like to ask. Is it flexible to size and orientation? If the phone luckily mobile design is not as challenging as web design. Because web design is very elastic. My browser size can be anything. But my phone, you generally design for smartphones, mini tablets, and tablets. And your designs have to work in those three situations. But maybe it flips, maybe it doesn't. So that's one big question. This one was a really painful thing to address. We worked in the TV space, and so we had these beautiful, beautiful mocks with these posters of TV shows that we loved, and they were just fantastic. And then I was like, well, where am I supposed to get these posters? Where am I getting all of these beautiful imagery? Or sometimes like the user, like the tagline, we'll pin where the location is, and then maybe like we'll have these other features. But then take that same data and start, this user actually didn't opt in to have the location, so strip that out. This user actually didn't put that, so strip that out. And then your mock, which was really well balanced from a design perspective, actually looks very aesthetically unpleasing once you pluck out 2 or 3 key pieces of data. So, is it going to work? Is the design going to work with really incomplete data, which is what's going to be out there in the world? So this is really painful, because you implement it and like, hey, this is like the mocks. Well, the data we don't have all of the data. This is a commonly overlooked one, which is simply the loading states. The loading states involved with, people forget that there's network access often with each of these things. Another common question is like, okay, the app is there, it looks great, but it's as if it's sprung into existence from nothing. But in fact, that's not the case. At one point, it started off empty. So how do I fill in that? How do I fill in that state? What does it look like? What's the null state? And if you're a smart product person, that's also where you put your calls to action. Because if it's empty now, great, but then let's fill it. But then that's a whole new set of wireframes to kind of lead people down that flow to encourage them to do something with the empty state. There's often a completely different mentality. So you have to when you're looking at your app, and this is hard to do, but you have to kind of split your eyes and look at it and pretend like you're seeing it for the first time. But you actually have to put on 2 completely different hats, depending on whether you're a new user or an existing user. And so it's important to inspect your wireframes from that perspective. So you might be thinking to yourself, these wireframes, it's those damn designers. They're just not good at making complete wireframes because they can't think it through, right? And so let's, and they're going to cause 2 to 3 times our delay on our project. So let's just let's take that back and shoot them if they're not giving us good wireframes. That's actually not the takeaway. They're responsible for coming to the team with the wireframes. But it's actually, in our opinion, the product's and engineering's responsibility to audit the wireframes. So it's when we are coming, the thing that we realized, for example, another mistake that we made early on was we didn't include everybody in the user story process from the beginning. So oftentimes when we get to the very tail end, the engineer will be unhappy because the user story was just weird, right? And you would have to kind of go back to the beginning. So what we realized is no, we got to pitch the user story from day one with all key stakeholders. There's actually a rule at Facebook. Facebook is a very engineering-run company, and so their rule is if I can't convince, and GitHub is even more extreme with this, by the way. Actually, I'll use them as an example. So the way they don't have any managers, it's a weird concept. Instead, I have to believe that it's a good feature, and then I have to be able to convince you. If I can't recruit up to my fellow engineers and designers that this is a good product idea, it doesn't get done at GitHub. So we try to embrace that philosophy at Miso. So at the beginning of a product cycle, if our product manager couldn't convince our engineering team that this is a good user story, then we need to address that from the very beginning. So at our iterations, everyone, I guess, had to be a cohesive part of the process, and therefore, when the wireframes came down, the product engineering team had to own the review of these wireframes. And this is the other part that really tripped us up a little bit. It seems silly, talking about it as an engineer when you think I know about testing. But it was a really hard thing. It was a really hard thing to underestimate. So we just just learned to slot in a week for testing always. And again, our learning here was how to go about that testing. So it was one way, which is the highest level, always return to your user story. You know, so if I'm making Uber, did it satisfy? This flow? Like if I'm seeing this fresh with that need fresh, did it actually satisfy my user story? One thing that's very particular to Android is the device fragmentation. So I don't know how you guys have dealt with device fragmentation. I'll tell you what our so we interviewed the Instagram guys when we were auditing our Android curriculum. We went and interviewed a lot of engineers from a lot of different companies. We interviewed people from Instagram, Twitter, and Square, and asked them how they dealt with certain things. So Instagram answered for how they dealt with device fragmentation. They definitely did concentrate on the top phones, because they took the top feature phones and they built and designed for them first. But then, when it gets closer to the end of the race, that's when you pull out your whole family of phones. They went to Best Buy. They're saying, "Oh, I should buy," and they bought every Android phone that they get their hands on at Best Buy. And they tested it. It was broken. It was broken everywhere. So for Android, though, the secret for them was simply, they just had there was just no workaround. They just started to okay, why is this really low-end Android phone not working for the screen? And they would start turning off features until it would work again. So their order of operations, step one, get it working beautifully for the Samsung S4, and then a few of the other top-of-line phones, and then go down to low-end phones and just start turning on features. Because you just can't get around it. They're lower-end phones, and their capabilities are less. At the end of the day, just like the engineers and the product will own the design review, fundamentally, if a founder, let's say that you guys weren't actually, a lot of you guys are engineers here, so you're probably building your own product, but there may come a day when you're outsourcing the build of some part of your system. So you can't, honestly, we try to audit the code quality. It's so hard just to keep the audit of the code quality going, especially for a contractor. And so it's our belief that the role of the founder is to audit the quality of the product. So they're the final kind of stopping point for owning the quality. And so our CEO was fantastic at this. I would test it for hours. But the problem was I programmed it, right? So everything that I could anticipate, I already captured in my edge case. And he plays it for 5 minutes and breaks it. How did that happen? So your developer cannot be your tester. It's not that they're not smart, but they program all the edge cases. They know exactly how to not break it. This is where, as a founder, you have to roll up your sleeves and actually get involved with the product. So finally, we got our iterations going. We're cranking. We're avoiding killing each other, so we're pretty happy. Now, how do we take a look at our product? So at the end of the day, your product is your users. If you're not satisfying a real use case, then you don't have a user. So it's important to be able to track them. So how do we go about that? A lot of people will say at this point A/B testing. They just whip out the word A/B testing. They hate it. I don't believe in A/B testing at this stage. So the stage that I'm envisioning you guys at is, hey, if Christmas is coming up, might as well build a mobile app. Maybe I'll make $1 million. Who knows? Maybe I'll find a lottery ticket, or maybe I'll get a founding company and build it. And so you are not ready for A/B testing. Instead, so what are the right questions, right? So the right questions is, well, one, do they even care about your user story? Do they even care about your product? Does anyone here use New Relic before? Has anyone here done, okay, so if you've done web development before, never, ever do web development without New Relic again. If you're making a product, cohort retention is the thing to look at. Is bar none, right? So when you're talking to your board, they're going to ask you for 2 stats. They like the daily active usage over monthly active usage. That's the top line that they always look at. But cohort retention is actually a much clearer way to look at how much users like your product. Has anyone here heard cohort retention before? So Keith Raboy, who was the CEO of Square, he was one of our angel investors. He kind of gave us this learning, which we carry with us. But basically, with cohort retention, you follow a particular set of individuals over time. So you don't look at your user base as a whole. You take, like, say, a dozen at a time and just track them very closely as a group, as a cohort. And so this is the average cohort chart. So it's a kind of a crazy table, and I'm going to talk about how to analyze this table. So first, what it is. Each row is a cohort. So imagine, like, on the upper left, there's 25.6%. So what that represents is that in my first cohort, the first people who ever used my product, in the first week after they signed up, 25% of them came back. And in the second week, that dropped down to 6%, and then 5.4%. But then on the second row, a brand new set came in the following week, and they fell down as well. So what I'm looking at here is the way I analyze this is like each one of these things, you notice, like, will always settle down to some particular value. In this case, this product is terrible. This product is settling down to, like, the 1 to 2% area. You're really targeting at least 15% cohort retention. Otherwise, your product is straight up not valuable. Now, it could be that your product just needs a little tweak. It just needs to be, the story of it is just not coming through, and the story needs to be retold. But as it stands, your product is not reaching its users if you're sub 15% at the settlement time. There's a couple other ways I look at this chart. So I'll always look at these first two columns. Because as you guys know, with first impressions, you don't get a second chance to make first impressions. But cohort analysis allows you to look at how your first impressions are going as you're making product changes. So let's say that, like, in week 6, all of a sudden I went from 26 to 28 and then 28 to 30. Those are actually big jumps. And so I would be asking, what did we do to improve our first impressions by over 10%? If you look at things across the diagonal, then that's one week. That's all in the same time. So it's one cohort's, like, 11th week, and then this cohort's first week. So if your server goes down, then you might notice that a diagonal will dip. So, one of our favorite mentors, Joe Kraus, was fond of telling us, if you care about something, measure it. But be really careful of what you measure. So the sad thing about cohort, and Keith warned us about this, Keith Raboy warned us about this, is you're like, oh, I'll put this chart up, and the whole team is going to be motivated by it. Actually, cohort retention is really hard to move. You can try all kinds of things. It just will not budge. It is just rock steady. For the 4 years at Miso, like, man, I've never seen that cohort. And we did check-ins for TV. So check into what you're watching on a TV episode. Sounds retarded, it was. Like, we did all kinds of things. We could not make it go down. It was like, no matter how, we could not mess it up. It would just not go down. And it wouldn't go up either. So this, I took the mean, and I'm stealing this from Keith again. Cohort retention is the intrinsic measure of how good your product is. It's just like the intrinsic feature of your product. So the really awesome thing, so originally, we built our own cohort charts, because at the time there really was no technology for this. But the cool thing about cohort is you can actually filter it pretty extensively to a particular feature. So the cohort that we like to look at is just a general cohort, like, of app launches, right? So, like, how many people launched it in week 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let's say that my product has been steady for a while, and I just want to add a feature. Like, you know how Instagram added that Maps feature recently? Like, I guess it's been like 6 months or more now. But, you can look to see, like, where you've taken all of your Instagram photos. So I would want to see the cohort for just tab. But the first question I would ask myself is, are people even discovering that tab? So the beautiful thing about cohort is you can filter out people who have never clicked on that maps tab. Because maybe it wasn't a problem they didn't care. Maybe the problem is they just didn't see it. So cohort allows you to just focus on people who have seen it at least once. And then you can look at their retention. So maybe the last little detail to observe is that if you ever see, so your cohorts should always be decreasing. If it increases, like if it ever goes from 8 to 10 and then back down to 8, what that means is that the window of your cohort is too small. So for example, look at TurboTax, right? That's the easiest example to think of. TurboTax is used once a year. So imagine I was looking at the weekly cohort for TurboTax. It would look terrible. It would look like great usage and then 0 for like, but if I looked at it, I would see it spike up again at the 1 year mark. So when I'm looking at TurboTax, I have to widen the cohort window to greater than 1 year. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are you a daily use product, a 2 to 3 day use product, or like every couple of week product? And that's the cohort that you're interested in. And you increase your cohort window to that. So I mean, our goal here is just validating what people want. So, mixed panel is the only cohort system that I know of that is the most flexible with all of these really fine-grained cohort needs. And the next kind of area, this is much more straightforward. So like, you guys have probably worked with bottlenecks before, so this is about funnel tracking, right? There's two fundamental causes of bottlenecks in our opinion. The first is a trust bottleneck. So when we first launched Miso, we actually launched it with a sign-in with Facebook only. We're like, everyone trusts Facebook. Everyone's used to this by now. They'll just click it and go. But actually, we found that not to be the case. So they did not yet trust our service to authenticate via Facebook. So when we added in a username and password there, we saw the signups actually go up by a factor of 3. So in that case, they just didn't trust us. They didn't trust us with their privacy. There's other kinds of trust too, which is like, I don't trust you to not waste my time. Why should I do this? Why should I add a review service to Yelp right now? And so for that, you have to kind of earn their trust in different mechanisms, maybe using social proof or some other techniques. The other bottleneck is easier to address. It's simply friction. So for example, a lot of systems are based on having a variety of users. So you have the 90-9-1 ratio when it comes to consumption versus production. So let's take Reddit, for example. 90% of Reddit users simply go to Reddit and read the links. 9% of Reddit users will comment and engage with other people in the community. 1% of Reddit users will comb through the news section and create subreddits and do all kinds of insane things. In a lot of systems, the value of the community is built on the backs of that 1%. So there's rarely friction in the consumption experience. There's almost always friction in the creation experience. And so it's key to reduce as much as possible the friction in that creation. And so you use funnels, and you guys probably get this point. But there's a lot of services actually that do this in my opinion equally well. Mixpanel is one of them, but Dismetrics and Google will do that quite well as well. So you just need to look to see where your drop-offs are, back up to that stage, and try to understand: is this a trust bottleneck or is it a friction bottleneck? Finally, maybe like we want to fine tune. So at that point, that's when we bring out our A/B testing tricks. So we take our audience, we split it into two. We give one experience to one group, we give another experience to the other group, and we measure the differences in their funnels. So this, for some reason, is the one that people talk about first, but I actually think that for most cases, it's not the one you should be thinking about, because it's later down the road. It depends on what stage you're at. If you're Google Mail, if you're Gmail, then you're at this stage. You should be A/B testing like everything, every experience. They do. But if you're an early stage company, if you guys are building an app over Christmas, then you are not even close to ready for A/B testing. In my opinion, you should be looking at the cohort charts So that's it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your attention. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, how do you, I guess on the idea formulation, figure out if you have a good idea, figure out has it been done already,
Well, every idea's been done already.
Okay.
So you can start with that, and that's not a bad thing.
Okay.
That's true.
So what do you do then? I mean, you gotta just try harder? I mean...
No, I mean, I'm not an expert, so I'll steal it from like 4 steps to the epiphany. It depends on what kind of market you're trying to attack. Like for example, like Mint came along, Mint.com, and they attacked the cookie space. So that was what they call an existing product, existing market. And you can compete in an existing product, existing market based on quality or based on cost. So in that situation, that's usually fairly straightforward also, right? It can be an existing market, new product. So for example, Uber. People are already, this is my favorite situation. If people are already pulling out their wallets, they're already dishing out cash, and that means the market already exists. So for Uber, people are already paying for taxis, but now I'm going to offer this new crazy thing where like I call these limo drivers or these random people to come pick me up. The hardest, and the one that we've worked in the past, and I'll never do again, to be honest, is new product, new market. New market means they're currently not pulling out their wallets. And you want to convince them to pull out their wallets for the first time ever. That is brutal. That's when you actually pray for competitors. Because when you pray for competitors, because they grow the market space. They prove out the market exists. So if you have other people chasing that with you, then you guys will grow the market together.
Very good.
So you talked about cohort retention, and that's awesome, but for like an enterprise app, how does that apply to that, where basically something's going to be forced upon users?
So your internal tool, basically?
Say an internal tool, that's a good example.
I see. I mean, but like, that question kind of weirds me out a little bit because like, I don't think I'd ever be in a position not to care about my user needs.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, but how do you know, I mean, your users are coming back. But how do you know they're happy?
Oh, I see what you're saying. They're forced to come back.
Right.
Yeah, but like, a lot of companies adopt Salesforce and they don't use it.
Yeah.
So therefore, like that, because that never works exactly. Like,
sure.
They'll just dodge the features. They may sign in. But if you look at the cohort for individual features, I guarantee they're not doing the elaborate reporting system that Salesforce will have to do.
Okay, so yeah, break it down into individual features, see
see
how well they use.
Maybe my co-founder can answer better, but like, because his last startup was, actually that's, the way that he attacked that was, you actually have a need, you have a user, so he would interview those people constantly. So he wouldn't rely on the cohort piece maybe as much, but just like, he did an exhaustive set of interviews constantly.
What's the challenge for
Yeah.
makes sense.
Right.
Where it comes from pilots. To just get an idea of the deal start working on jobs.
So with the challenge, so we're in SF, you're coming from Iowa. What is the difference? Like, tell me more.
Just challenges for like, getting your idea to the execution stage. Is that are there location challenges as well that you've seen?
Well, you mean outside of SF? Well, I'm fortunate to be in SF, right? So like, I'll tell you positive about being in SF. Maybe you can tell me about Iowa. Like, in SF, it's not unique to be founded. Like, I can throw a rock and hit like 10 founders. Like but it's a great support system because everyone's doing it. And by the way, I'll tell you the number one thing about founders. But number one about being a real founder, you have to be prepared to be punched in the stomach every day for like 6 years. Like there's just no success until there's success. And until then, there's just despair and failure.
That does answer the question.
So it's nice to have it's nice to have other people around you going through that same experience. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you very much.